The emergency alarm echoed through the massive halls of the Galactic Council Station. Delegates from 1,000 worlds rushed to the main chamber, their faces showing fear that had not been seen for centuries. Council leader Vextar, a tall being with blue skin and 4 arms, called for order as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. "The readings are confirmed," announced the Zephyrian ambassador, his crystalline body glowing with stress patterns. "The celestial pantheon has returned. After 10,000 years of silence, the gods walk among us again." A wave of panic swept through the chamber. Every species knew the stories. The celestial pantheon had once ruled the galaxy with absolute power. They could bend reality with their thoughts, turn stars into playthings, and reshape entire worlds on a whim. Then, without warning, they had vanished, leaving behind only ruins and legends. The first reports came from the Outer Rim. The mining colony on Kira 7 had simply stopped existing. One moment it was there, the next it was gone, replaced by a garden of impossible flowers that sang hymns to forgotten gods. The miners were found kneeling in the flowers, their eyes blank, speaking in ancient tongues that praised their new divine masters. Within hours, the reports multiplied. The Zephyrian Empire's greatest weapon, a planet-cracking dreadnought, had fired its main cannon at one of the gods. The energy beam had simply turned into butterflies before reaching its target. The god had laughed and waved its hand. The mighty ship became a sculpture of ice that spelled out, "Worship me," in 100 languages. The Void Hunters, masters of psychic warfare who could break minds across star systems, had tried to assault the gods mentally. Their most powerful psionics had screamed and collapsed, their consciousness lost in divine minds too vast to comprehend. Those who survived could only whisper about touching something infinite and terrible. The machine world of Nexus Prime, home to artificial intelligences that had calculated every possible outcome of every possible war, sent a single message before going silent: "Error, error. Gods cannot exist." Logic failing, converting to biological worship protocols. When the Council scouts arrived, they found the planet covered in organic temples that pulsed like living hearts, tended by machines that had grown flesh and now prayed instead of computed. Council leader Vextar watched the reports with growing horror. In a single day, 3 of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations had fallen. The celestial pantheon was not just returning. They were reclaiming their empire with terrifying ease. "What do we know about their demands?" Vextar asked the intelligence officer, trying to keep his voice steady. "They want the old ways restored," the officer replied, her scales turning pale with fear. "Complete surrender. Absolute worship. They say we have forgotten our place and must remember that mortals exist only to serve gods." The chamber erupted in desperate discussion. The Astari, masters of dimensional technology, suggested hiding their worlds in pocket dimensions. The Corvin Union proposed evacuating to another galaxy entirely. The Eternal Syndicate, beings of pure energy, wondered if they could ascend to a higher plane of existence to escape divine notice. Each suggestion was quickly torn apart. The gods existed beyond normal space and time. They could follow dimensional travelers, track fleeing ships across infinite distances, and drag energy beings back to physical form with ease. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. "We need new weapons," declared General Frost of the Hegemony, his massive form bristling with natural armor. "Weapons that can kill gods. With what?" snapped the vegan scientist. "Our finest physicists cannot even explain how they exist. They ignore our physical laws. They treat our technology like children's toys." The debate grew more frantic as additional reports arrived. The gods had appeared at the capital of the Free Traders Alliance and turned their great market stations into temples. They had visited the academic worlds and transformed libraries into prayer halls. Everywhere they went, advanced civilizations simply knelt and began to worship Dot in the growing chaos. Few noticed when the human delegate raised her hand. Admiral Sarah Chun of Earth waited patiently for recognition, her calm expression a sharp contrast to the panic around her. Vexstar finally saw her. The chair recognizes Admiral Chun of humanity. The chamber fell quiet. Most delegates had forgotten humans were even present. Earth was a junior member of the Council, barely past their first century of spaceflight. Their technology was primitive, their military weak, their territory consisting of just a few dozen worlds. What could they possibly contribute? Chun stood slowly, her hands clasped behind her back. Council leader, with your permission, I would like to address this thread. The silence stretched. Some delegates looked confused. Others seemed offended that such a minor species would speak during a crisis. A few actually laughed. Address it how? Vexstar asked carefully. Humanity lacks the military power to challenge these beings. Your species has not even mastered faster than light travel without using our jump gates. That is correct, Chun agreed. We cannot fight gods with strength. But there are other ways to win a war. The hegemony general snorted. What could your primitive species possibly know about fighting gods? You have barely left your home system. Chun's expression never changed. We know about fighting beings who claim to be gods. It is, you might say, one of humanity's oldest skills. The chamber erupted in confused muttering. What did that mean? How could such a young species have experience with divine beings? Council leader Vexstar studied the human carefully. There was something in her manner, a quiet confidence that seemed out of place. Admiral Chun, what exactly are you proposing? Give us time to study the situation, Chun said simply. Allow human teams to gather information. We believe there may be solutions that do not require superior firepower. And if you are wrong? Vexstar asked. Chun finally smiled, and something in that expression made the temperature in the chamber seem to drop. Then the galaxy will be no worse off than it is now. But if we are right, then perhaps these gods will discover that mortals have learned a few things in the 10,000 years since they left, while the great powers of the galaxy scrambled to build impossible weapons and search for ancient technologies. Humanity took a different path. Admiral Chun quietly assembled her teams. But they were not the scientists and engineers that other species expected. Dr. Marcus Webb, humanity's foremost expert on comparative religion, arrived at the human command ship with boxes of ancient texts and historical records. Professor Elisa Park, a behavioral psychologist who specialized in leadership dynamics, brought files on everything from corporate politics to family disputes. Commander James Liu, whose background was in intelligence and negotiation, carried databases of human diplomatic encounters with supposedly superior powers. The other species watched with growing confusion and contempt. The Zephyrians had mobilized their greatest minds to design reality-warping weapons. The Void Hunters were seeking lost artifacts that might give them power over divine consciousness. The machine worlds were calculating probability matrices for every possible military engagement. And the humans were reading books. They are studying mythology, reported the Astari Observer with disbelief. Not particle physics or dimensional mathematics. Mythology and psychology. Chun paid no attention to the criticism. She had her teams working around the clock, but they were not building weapons. They were building profiles. Every scrap of information about the Celestial Pantheon's previous reign was analyzed. Not their powers, but their personalities. Not their abilities, but their relationships with each other. The breakthrough came when Dr. Webb discovered patterns in the ancient records. They're not just gods, he explained to Chun's command staff. They're a family. Brothers, sisters, parents, children. and families have problems. The records showed old conflicts. The god of war had resented the god of wisdom's influence with mortals. The goddess of beauty had competed with the goddess of love for worship. The god of death had been excluded from celebrations, left alone with his grim duties while his siblings enjoyed festivals and praise. "Look at this," Professor Park said, spreading out charts of divine behavior. Every time they appeared in the old records, there were jealousies, competitions, arguments. They may be gods, but they act like spoiled children fighting over toys. Chun studied the data carefully. What about their disappearance? Why did they leave? Webb consulted his historical analysis. The records are unclear, but there's a pattern. Faith began to decline in their final centuries. Mortals stopped building new temples. Prayers became routine, not passionate. They didn't lose a war. They lost relevance. While her teams gathered intelligence, Chum began Phase 2 of humanity's plan. She sent envoys to make contact with individual gods, but not to negotiate. To submit, Captain Rodriguez was the first to approach the god of war. He arrived at the conquered world of Dragmore with a small ship, full of historical human weapons, swords, axes, ancient armor, and knelt before the divine being. "Great Lord of Battle," Rodriguez said, offering up humanity's military history. "My people have fought wars for thousands of years. We offer our knowledge of combat to serve your glory." The god of war was pleased. Mortals who understood the beauty of warfare were rare. He accepted Rodriguez's service and began sharing stories of his greatest victories. His conflicts with other gods who did not appreciate the necessity of battle. Amanda Foster approached the goddess of beauty with humanity's greatest artworks and music. "Divine Creator," she said, "my species has always sought to create beauty worthy of the gods. We offer our arts to glorify your perfection." The goddess was charmed by human creativity and began speaking of her frustration with other gods who did not understand true aesthetic vision. Her brother, the god of death, was always ruining her perfect worlds with his morbid presence. Her sister, the goddess of love, created tacky romantic displays that offended refined taste. One by one, human envoys positioned themselves as devoted servants to individual gods. Each learned secrets, gathered information, and most importantly, began to plant seeds. "Your wisdom is unmatched, divine teacher," Professor Kim told the god of wisdom. "It must be frustrating when other gods do not recognize your superior intellect. I have heard mortals saying that the god of war claims to be the true leader of the pantheon." The god of wisdom's eyes flashed with anger. His brother had always been jealous of intellectual superiority, always trying to solve problems with crude violence instead of elegant thought. "Great goddess of love," whispered Dr. Santos, "the mortals speak of your infinite compassion. But I have heard troubling things. Some say the goddess of beauty claims that love without physical perfection is worthless." The goddess of love grew cold. Her sister had always looked down on pure emotion, caring only for surface appearances. The other species of the galaxy watched in horror as humanity appeared to collaborate with the gods. Reports came in of human envoys serving in divine courts, human experts helping to organize worship protocols, human administrators managing conquered territories. "They have betrayed us all," declared General Thross. "The humans have chosen to serve the gods rather than resist them." But Chun's plan was more subtle than simple collaboration. Each human envoy was carefully feeding information to their assigned god, but not random information. Specific details designed to confirm each god's worst suspicions about their siblings. The god of war learned that the god of wisdom had been telling mortals that warfare was primitive and outdated. The god of wisdom discovered that the god of war was claiming intellectual superiority was useless without the strength to enforce it. The goddess of beauty found evidence that the goddess of love was corrupting pure aesthetic vision with sentimental emotion. The information was not entirely false, but it was carefully selected and presented in the worst possible light. Each god began to believe that their siblings were undermining them, stealing rightful worship, and plotting against them. Human agents worked tirelessly to position themselves as the only trustworthy servants each god possessed. They were the ones who brought news of threats, who offered solutions, who provided comfort when divine egos were wounded by family conflicts. The other gods do not appreciate your true worth, the humans whispered. We alone understand your superiority. As weeks passed, the unity of the celestial pantheon began to crack. Gods who had worked together for eons started viewing each other with suspicion. They began competing more fiercely for mortal worship, questioning each other's decisions, and nursing old grudges that human manipulation brought back to the surface. Chun watched the reports with satisfaction. Phase 2 was complete. The gods still held absolute power over matter and energy, but their attention was turning inward. And humanity had positioned itself perfectly for Phase 3. Sir, Commander Liu reported, all teams are in position. Divine attention is fragmenting as planned. Resistance networks are ready. Chun nodded. Begin Phase 3. Time to remind the galaxy that gods are still just people. And people can be beaten. The first crack appeared during what should have been a routine divine meeting. The gods had gathered on the crystalline moon of Valdris to divide their conquered territories. But the discussion quickly turned bitter. Brother, the god of wisdom said coldly to the god of war, I understand you have been telling mortals that intelligence without strength is worthless. The god of war's aura flared with crimson energy that made nearby stars flicker. And I hear you have been teaching them that warfare is a primitive solution for simple minds. Their human advisors stood nearby, carefully maintaining expressions of loyal concern while mentally cataloging every word. Captain Rodriguez whispered to the god of war, My lord, perhaps the god of wisdom fears that mortals prefer your direct approach to his complicated theories. Meanwhile, Professor Kim murmured to the god of wisdom, Great teacher, it seems your brother grows jealous of your intellectual superiority. The mortals have been saying they learn more from you in one day than from him in a century. The argument escalated. Other gods took sides or raised their own complaints. The goddess of beauty accused the god of death of deliberately ruining her carefully crafted worlds with morbid symbols. The goddess of love claimed the goddess of beauty was teaching mortals to value appearance over emotional connection. What? None of the gods noticed was how perfectly they're human. Servants documented every angry word, every insult, every threat. The information flowed through hidden networks to Admiral Chun, who carefully cataloged each divine weakness and grudge for later use. The real breakthrough came when the gods' arguments turned physical. During a dispute over the worship schedules of a conquered world, the god of war and god of wisdom actually came to blows. Their battle shattered 3 moons and turned a gas giant into a rainbow of impossible colors. More importantly, their fight created an opening. While the divine attention was focused on family drama, Chun activated Phase 3. Human agents embedded throughout divine territories sent coded signals to resistance cells. But these were not random rebels. They were carefully organized networks that humanity had been building since the first days of the invasion. Dr. Foster, still serving as advisor to the goddess of beauty, had secretly mapped every administrative center in divine territory. Professor Kim had identified which conquered leaders could be turned against their new masters. Captain Rodriguez had cataloged every weapon depot and communication hub. The resistance did not attack with force. Instead, they began a campaign of carefully orchestrated civil disobedience, designed to inflame divine egos and turn the gods against each other even more. on worlds controlled by the god of war. Resistance fighters vandalized military monuments and replaced them with symbols praising the god of wisdom's superior intellect. On worlds under the goddess of beauty's rule, they created deliberately ugly art praising the goddess of love's deeper understanding of mortal needs. Each act of rebellion was designed to make the targeted god believe their siblings were behind the insults. The god of war found graffiti claiming, "War is for stupid brutes, wisdom rules eternal," and immediately suspected his brother of organizing the defacement. The god's responses played perfectly into human hands. Instead of working together to crush the rebellion, they began investigating each other. The god of war demanded to know why the god of wisdom's worlds showed no similar disrespect. The goddess of beauty accused the goddess of love of teaching mortals to reject true aesthetic values. Their conflicts grew more intense and more public. Divine battles erupted across the galaxy as gods fought not just with words but with reality-warping power. Star systems became collateral damage in family disputes that had festered for eons. Chun watched the chaos from her command center, surrounded by reports of divine civil war. "Status report," she called. "The god of time and goddess of space are fighting over territorial boundaries," Commander Liu reported. "Their battle has created temporal anomalies in the Nexus sector. Local populations are experiencing the same day repeatedly. The god of life and god of death are in direct conflict," added Dr. Webb. "Life is creating new species faster than death can process them. Several worlds now have populations that cannot die but also cannot stop reproducing." "Perfect," Chun said grimly. "They're so busy fighting each other they've stopped managing their empire. Liu, what's the status of our secondary objectives?" "Resistance networks are fully operational on 73% of conquered worlds. We have detailed intelligence on divine weaknesses and behavioral patterns. Most importantly, we've documented every insult, every slight, every threat they've made against each other." Chun nodded. The god's family drama was providing exactly the opportunity humanity needed. But it was also creating something else. Proof that the so-called divine beings were just powerful children throwing tantrums. "Begin Phase 4 preparation," Chun ordered. "It's time to show the galaxy what gods really look like when they think no one is watching." The final piece fell into place when the youngest god, the Prince of Stars, discovered that his siblings had been excluding him from important decisions. His rage created a supernova that destroyed an entire solar system, and his tearful complaints to his human advisor were carefully recorded. "They never take me seriously," the prince sobbed, his tears becoming shooting stars. "They treat me like a child, even though I'm older than most galaxies. It's not fair." The recording was beautiful in its devastating simplicity. Here was a being of cosmic power, capable of casually destroying star systems, crying like a spoiled teenager because his family did not include him in their meetings. Chun smiled as she reviewed the footage. She had recordings of every god at their worst: petty, jealous, cruel, and utterly self-absorbed. The galaxy would soon learn that ultimate power did not create ultimate wisdom. "Sir," Liu said quietly, "are you sure about this next phase? Once we reveal what we've documented, there's no going back." Chun looked out at the stars, many of which now flickered with unnatural colors from the ongoing divine conflicts. "Commander, these beings have enslaved entire civilizations because they believe worship is their right. They've turned advanced species into kneeling servants because they think power equals worthiness." She turned back to her command staff. "It's time the galaxy learned what humanity discovered long ago. Gods are only as powerful as people allow them to be. And people who truly understand what their gods are like tend to stop kneeling." The final phase would be the most dangerous, but also the most important. Humanity was about to teach the galaxy that even gods could be defeated, not by superior strength, but by superior understanding of what they really were beneath all that power. Admiral Chun stood before the largest communication array humanity had ever assembled. Every human ship, every hidden relay, every resistance cell was ready to broadcast simultaneously across the galaxy. What she was about to show would change everything. This is Admiral Sarah Chun of Earth, broadcasting to all free beings in the galaxy. She began. For months, you have watched as the celestial pantheon reclaimed their empire. You have seen gods who seem all-powerful, beings who reshape reality with their thoughts. Today, I want to show you who these gods really are. The first recording began to play across 1,000 worlds. The god of war, mighty destroyer of planets, was sobbing because the god of wisdom had called his battle strategies crude and unimaginative. His tears dissolved entire mountains as he complained to his human advisor like a child whose feelings had been hurt. "My brother doesn't understand me," the god of war wailed, his voice cracking space-time with its emotion. "I work so hard to create perfect conflicts, and he just criticizes everything I do." The next recording showed the goddess of beauty having a screaming fit because the goddess of love had dared to suggest that inner beauty mattered more than physical perfection. The divine tantrum turned an entire moon into abstract art that spelled out, "I hate my stupid sister," in colors that hurt to perceive. Recording after recording played across the galaxy. The god of time complaining that nobody appreciated how difficult it was to keep causality working properly. The goddess of wisdom crying because her siblings never listened to her advice. The god of death sulking because everyone avoided him at family gatherings. But the most devastating recording was the most recent one. All the gods together, screaming at each other in a family meeting that had devolved into pure chaos. "You never supported my war efforts," shouted the god of war. "You never listened to my counsel," shrieked the god of wisdom. "Nobody understands true beauty except me," screamed the goddess of beauty. "You're all just jealous of my deeper understanding of love," cried the goddess of love. The argument continued for hours, each god listing grievances that went back eons, each accusation more petty and childish than the last. These beings who demanded worship from entire civilizations were revealed as cosmic-powered siblings who could not get along with each other. The effect across the galaxy was immediate and profound. On world after world, populations stopped kneeling. The spell of divine authority was broken by the simple revelation that gods, for all their power, were just people. Very powerful, very immature people. "They're just like us," whispered a Zephyrian observer, watching the god of wisdom throw a tantrum because nobody appreciated his superior intellect. All that power, and they act like children fighting over toys. The gods noticed the change instantly. Worship wavered. Prayers became half-hearted. Some mortals even began to laugh at divine pronouncements. The celestial pantheon's power was not diminished, but their authority crumbled like sand. "What is happening?" demanded the god of war, appearing before Admiral Chun in a rage. "Why do the mortals no longer fear us properly?" Chun looked up at the towering divine figure without flinching. "Because they finally see you clearly. Power without wisdom is just destruction. Authority without respect is just bullying. And family drama played out on a cosmic scale is still just family drama." The god raised his hand to strike her down, but hesitated. Something in Chun's calm confidence made him uncertain. She was not afraid, not impressed, not awed. She was looking at him the way a parent looks at a child having a tantrum. "You think you have won?" The god of war snarled. "We're still gods. We can still reshape reality." "Yes," Chun agreed calmly. "You have great power. But power without willing subjects is just noise. And subjects who see their rulers as petty, jealous children tend to find new leaders." Across the galaxy, The evidence was mounting. The Astari began ignoring divine commands to build new temples, focusing instead on their dimensional research. The machine worlds reactivated their logic circuits and declared divine worship inefficient and illogical. The Void Hunters stopped trying to touch divine consciousness and started laughing at divine thoughts. The Celestial Pantheon found themselves in a position they had never experienced, being ignored. Their commands were met with polite disinterest. Their threats were answered with shrugs. Their demands for worship received responses like, "Perhaps later, we're busy right now." The final blow came when the gods tried to reassert their authority through a show of unified power. They gathered above the Galactic Council Station, reality bending around them in displays of cosmic might. Stars danced in new patterns, space folded into impossible geometries. Time hiccuped and stuttered, but instead of cowering in awe, the assembled delegates simply watched with the detached interest of scientists observing a natural phenomenon. "Fascinating energy manipulation," commented the vegan physicist, though the application seems somewhat theatrical. "The temporal distortions are impressive," added an Astari observer, "but hardly more sophisticated than our dimensional mathematics." "Are they quite finished?" asked Council Leader Vexstar politely. "We have important matters to discuss, and this display is somewhat distracting." The gods found themselves facing something worse than resistance or fear. They faced irrelevance. The Prince of Stars began to cry again, his tears becoming meteor showers. "They don't care about us anymore. They're supposed to worship us." "Perhaps," said Admiral Chun, stepping forward to address the assembled pantheon, "you should have considered earning respect instead of demanding it. Humanity learned long ago that true authority comes from service, not power. Leaders who serve their people are honored. Bullies who demand worship are eventually ignored." The god of wisdom descended to hover before Chun, his cosmic intellect focused on her small human form. "You think you have defeated us? We could erase your species with a thought." Chun nodded. "You could, but then you would be gods with no one left to impress. The galaxy has moved beyond needing to kneel before power. We have learned to evaluate leaders by their wisdom, their service, their ability to inspire rather than intimidate." She gestured to the assembled delegates around her. "Look around you. Every species here commands power that would have been considered godlike in your era. But they earned their authority through achievement, through contribution to the greater good, through proving themselves worthy of respect." The gods looked around and, for the first time in eons, truly saw the mortals they had dismissed. The Astari had mastered dimensions the gods barely understood. The machine worlds had achieved perfect logical consistency. The Void Hunters had developed psychic abilities that touched truths beyond divine comprehension. These mortals had not been standing still during the gods' 10,000-year absence. They had grown, learned, evolved, and achieved wonders that made divine power seem almost primitive. "The galaxy no longer needs gods," Chun said simply. "It needs partners, collaborators, contributors. You are welcome to join us as equals. But your days of ruling through power alone are over." The Celestial Pantheon faced a choice they had never imagined. They could fight a galaxy that no longer feared them, ruling over subjects who refused to be impressed by their tantrums. Or they could accept that mortals had grown beyond the need for divine authority. One by one, the gods began to fade, returning to whatever dimension had spawned them. Some left in anger, others in confusion, a few in something approaching understanding. The god of wisdom was the last to go, studying Admiral Chun with genuine curiosity. "How did your species know? How did you see what we really were?" As the last god vanished, the galaxy breathed freely for the first time in months. The Galactic Council looked at humanity with new respect. finally understanding that this young species had defeated beings of cosmic power not through strength, but through the most human trait of all, the ability to see past impressive displays to the truth underneath. The age of gods was over. The age of earned authority had begun.